So, picture the scene for a second. You've just walked into one of those elite, high-end country clubs.
Oh, yeah. The really exclusive ones.
Right. You know the exact vibe I'm talking about. The grass is cut to the absolute millimeter. The iced tea just magically appears on your table before you even ask for it. And the staff, they don't just serve you, they know you.
They know your name. They ask about your kids.
Exactly. They ask about your kids by name. It feels, it feels totally effortless.
It feels like magic. I mean, that is the ultimate goal of hospitality, right?
Magic. But we know it's not actually magic, it's management. But here's what I didn't quite realize until I started digging into the stack of research you sent over for us to unpack this week. That whole effortless experience,
Yeah.
it is currently facing a massive crisis.
Oh, absolutely. It's hanging by a thread right now.
Yeah.
The industry actually calls it the revolving door problem. The entire hospitality world is bleeding staff right now. And private clubs are really taking the hardest hit.
And that's exactly why we're doing a deep dive today into this really comprehensive monograph by Boris Gradina. It was written for the Master Club Manager designation back in 2020.
Right.
It's titled New Employee Onboarding at Private Clubs. And I got to be honest, when I first saw the title, I thought, okay, we're going to talk about tax forms and uniforms.
Like a checklist.
Yeah, exactly. But this isn't just about filling out HR forms, is it?
Not at all. I mean, this is fundamentally about stopping the bleeding. Gradina went in and interviewed human resources directors at 10 of the top-tier private clubs in the U.S.
And these are big places, right?
Huge, ranging from about 470 to over 3,000 members.
Yeah.
And the whole mission of the research was to figure out why some employees stay for 20 years while others they quit in 20 days.
Which is wild. And the answer seems to hinge on two words that I assume most people listening to this have always just used interchangeably.
Oh, almost everyone does.
Orientation and onboarding. I mean, I've always thought they were just synonyms.
Yep.
You get the job, you go to orientation, boom, you're onboarded. Done.
That is the most common and probably the most expensive mistake a manager can make today. If there's one single thing to take away from this deep dive, it's that orientation and onboarding are two completely different species.
Okay, so help me out here. How does the research actually distinguish them?
Think of it this way. Orientation is logistics. Onboarding is psychology.
Logistics versus psychology. Okay, break that down for me.
So orientation is an event. It almost always happens on day one. It's highly transactional.
Like checking boxes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You show up, you fill out the I-9 form so you can legally get paid. Someone hands you this thick employee handbook that, let's be real, you'll never actually read.
Never. Not once.
Right. And they show you where the bathrooms are. It's a data dump.
It's the, here is where you park, please don't steal the office pens, sign on the dotted line phase.
Precisely. And don't get me wrong, it's necessary. You need tax forms. But it's completely static. Onboarding, on the other hand, is a process.
A longer process.
Much longer. According to Gradina's research, it's a process that needs to last anywhere from 90 days to a full year.
Wow. A full year.
Yeah, because it's relational. It's entirely about culture. It's the process of taking that total stranger and weaving them into the social fabric of the club so they actually feel like they want to stay.
So if I'm getting this right, orientation is basically how to not get fired, and onboarding is why you actually belong here?
That is a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
And the findings from the 10 clubs Gradina studied were pretty eye-opening. Every single club had orientation. I mean, you have to by law, but the onboarding,
I'm guessing it varied.
it was all over the map. Some clubs considered you done and fully onboarded after a week. Others had these highly structured plans mapped out for 120 days.
And surely that drastically impacts who stays and who walks out the door.
Absolutely. Which brings us to one of the most striking insights in the entire monograph. The research explicitly notes that every new employee gets onboarded, whether the club has a plan or not.
Wait, run that by me one more time. If the club has no plan, how are they getting onboarded?
Because they are still learning how to exist in that space. If you don't have a deliberate plan, the plan by default becomes sink or swim.
Oh, I see.
The new hire just figures it out by watching other people, picking up their bad habits, or just feeling totally ignored. They are learning how to be an employee there, but what they are really learning is that the culture is chaos.
And usually that leads to them just throwing their hands up and quitting.
Exactly.
That makes so much sense. If you don't actively teach them the culture, they'll just invent their own version of it. But let's play devil's advocate for just a second here.
Okay.
We are mostly talking about hourly staff in this context, right? Servers, groundskeepers, receptionists. Is turnover actually that big of a deal financially? Because people come and go in those types of jobs all the time.
It is shockingly expensive. The monograph cites SHRM data, the Society for Human Resource Management, showing that replacing an employee earning under $30,000 a year costs about 16% of their annual salary.
Hold on, 16%.
Yep, for an entry-level job. That sounds incredibly high for a role that doesn't necessarily require a specialized college degree.
And if they earn under $50,000, it jumps to 20%. The average cost per hire across the board is over $4,000. It sounds high until you do the math.
Right, because it's not just paying for a job ad.
Exactly. It's not just the ad on Indeed. It's the background check, the new uniform, the drug testing. But the biggest hidden cost is time.
The manager's time.
Yes, it's the hours a manager spends sitting in an office interviewing candidates instead of being out running the floor. It's the senior staff member who is moving at half speed for a week because they have a brand new person shadowing them.
So you're essentially burning cash before the new hire even clocks in for their very first real shift.
Precisely. And that doesn't even touch on the indirect costs the source talks about. The morale hit to the rest of the crew is huge.
Because they have to pick up the slack. Right. If you're a server and you suddenly have to cover a double shift 3 times a week because the new guy flaked and quit, you're going to burn out and you're going to quit too. It's a contagion.
That makes total sense.
Huh.
And there was a specific note in the research about institutional knowledge that really clicked for me. It's what I call the Mrs. Smith's teacup factor.
Oh, that is such a great example.
Because in a factory, if a worker quits on the assembly line, the machine just keeps running.
Right.
But in a private club, the product is the relationship. If your staff is constantly churning through that revolving door, nobody on the floor knows that Mrs. Smith prefers her tea in that one specific floral cup, or that Mr. Jones absolutely hates sitting near the drafty window.
And then Mrs. Smith starts to feel like a total stranger in her own club.
Exactly. And when that happens, she stops paying those hefty membership dues.
So the stakes are actually massive. It's not just an HR paperwork issue. It is the core business model at risk. And there is a ticking clock on all of this, which the study calls the retention window.
Right, the retention window. Up to 20% of turnover happens in the first 45 days.
Yes.
Why that specific window, though? What is happening in those first 45 days?
That is the period of buyer's remorse. Think about any time you make a big purchase or a major life change. For those first 6 weeks, the new hire is constantly looking around, asking themselves, is this what they promised me in the interview? Do I actually fit in here?
Evaluating the vibe.
Constantly. If you don't validate their decision to take the job in those first 45 days, they mentally check out.
So they haven't actually handed in their notice yet, but they've already decided they're going to leave.
Exactly. They were just waiting for the next paycheck. And once that mental decision is made, you cannot train it out of them. They're gone.
Which naturally brings us to the who of it all. Who are these people we are trying so desperately to convince to stay? Because the workforce has fundamentally changed. We aren't managing the same demographic we were 20 years ago.
No, not at all.
The source actually spends quite a bit of time analyzing millennials and Gen Z.
This is a huge piece of the puzzle right now. The monograph points out that Gen Z and millennials make up the largest labor segment for these entry-level hospitality roles. And historically, they're dubbed job hoppers.
The stats on that were crazy.
Yeah, the data shows they change jobs an average of 6.3 times between the ages of 18 and 25.
6.3 times. I mean, that is just a lot of W-2s to keep track of at tax time.
It really is. But it tells us something incredibly important about their psychology as workers. They are not afraid to leave if they aren't engaged. They view employment very much as a two-way street.
Right.
And those old-school training methods, like here is a 50-page printed manual, go sit in the break room for 3 hours and read it, those simply do not work with this demographic.
They want tech, right. They want to learn the same way they interact with everything else in their lives.
Exactly. They expect interactive, tech-based learning.
Yeah.
And they really need to know the why behind what they are doing, not just the how. But even more importantly, the source identifies a key strategy for retaining this specific group, which is the buddy system.
Oh, I definitely want to dig into the buddy system, but before we get there, there is another demographic challenge the monograph covers that I think we really need to highlight, which is the foreign-born workforce.
Yes, very crucial point. About 17% of the U.S. labor force is foreign-born. And in hospitality and service roles, that percentage is often significantly higher.
And the obvious challenge there is the language barrier.
That's the obvious one, yes. But the research points out that it goes much deeper than just language. It's an anxiety barrier.
Meaning it's not just, I don't know the English word for salad fork.
Right. It's more like, I don't understand how the local bus schedule works to get to my shift on time, or I don't know how to navigate opening a bank account to deposit my paycheck.
That is a lot of baseline stress.
Exactly. If you are constantly stressed about just surviving and functioning in a new country, you cannot focus on providing effortless, five-star service to club members.
I thought the solutions the surveyed clubs came up with for this were really clever, because it wasn't just a rigid, you must speak English to work here policy.
No, the most successful clubs adapted to their workforce. They used practical tools like Google Translate for their everyday documents. One club actually held their entire orientation in both English and Spanish simultaneously.
Wow.
Yeah. Another club went a step further and offered ESL English as a second language classes as a core part of their onboarding package.
See, that is actively investing in your people.
It really is. And they also utilized specific intern buddy programs. These buddies weren't just assigned to teach them how to bus a table. They were there to explain American culture.
Helping them navigate life outside the club walls.
Right. Because if you help someone navigate their actual life, they're going to feel safe with you. And loyalty stems directly from that feeling of safety.
Okay, so we know the core problem is that sink or swim chaos. We know the workforce is largely Gen Z and foreign-born workers who really crave that connection and safety. So let's get into the actual solutions, the best practices.
Let's do it.
The source outlines a few concepts that are honestly just brilliant. Let's start with pre-boarding.
Pre-boarding is essentially everything that happens before day one. Usually in a normal job, you sign the offer letter and then crickets.
Total radio silence.
Exactly. You hear absolutely nothing for 2 weeks until you finally show up for your first shift.
Which is exactly when that buyer's remorse starts creeping in. You start thinking, wait, did they forget they hired me?
Yes, but the best clubs in the study engage immediately. The source makes a really sharp distinction between an offer letter, which is formal, legal, and dry, and a welcome letter, which is warm, informal, and personal. It completely sets the tone.
And it's also about getting the boring stuff out of the way early, right?
Digitizing the paperwork is huge. If a new hire spends their entire first day sitting in a windowless HR office filling out tax forms, that is a terrible first impression.
A total energy killer.
Exactly. Get all that compliance stuff done digitally beforehand so day one can actually be a celebration of them joining the team.
One specific idea I saw in the monograph that stood out was the use of realistic job preview videos.
Oh, yes.
Basically, they show the candidates exactly what the grit of the job is before they even officially accept the offer. Doesn't that risk scaring good candidates off?
It might. And
Right.
honestly, that's a good thing. If you are going to absolutely hate cleaning muddy golf spikes or waking up at 4 a.m. to mow the greens in the humidity, it is much better to know that before you sign the contract, it saves everyone a ton of wasted time.
Makes sense. Weed them out early. Okay, now let's talk about the passport program. I have to be honest, when I was reading this part of the report, it sounded a little bit kindergarten to me. Getting stickers for visiting departments. Really?
It definitely sounds like a game for kids on the surface. But fundamentally, it's a highly sophisticated silo buster.
A silo buster.
Right. Here's the typical problem at a large private club. The golf staff never talks to the pool staff. The kitchen crew doesn't really know the groundskeepers. They literally live in different worlds on the same property.
And that separation creates friction.
Huge friction. You get this toxic us versus them mentality. The passport program completely disrupts that. The new hire gets an actual physical booklet, and their goal is to visit every single department in the club. Golf, tennis, banquets, kitchen, within their first 90 days.
So even if I'm hired just to be a tennis pro, I still have to go spend time in the main kitchen.
Exactly. You physically walk over there, you introduce yourself to a representative, you learn one specific thing about what they do all day, and then you get a stamp in your passport.
Okay, I see.
It forces you to look a human being in the eye. It builds empathy across the club. You're way less likely to scream at the kitchen staff for a late sandwich order if you actually know the guy back there sweating over the grill.
That completely flips my perspective on it. It's forcing a human connection in a way that just putting out a memo saying teamwork makes the dream work never, ever could.
Exactly.
Now, let's circle back to the buddy system. How is a buddy genuinely different from just being assigned a standard trainer? Because every job I've ever had, the buddy was just the senior person forcing me to shadow them all day.
That's a trainer. A trainer's job is to teach you tasks. A buddy's job is to teach you the ropes.
The unwritten rules.
Right. The research is incredibly clear on this distinction. The buddy has to be a peer, not a supervisor. It has to be a completely safe space.
The safe space for what, exactly?
Stupid questions.
Ah.
You're never going to ask your shift manager, hey, which chef do I need to avoid before they've had their morning coffee? Or how do I actually ask for a Saturday off without looking like I'm lazy? You ask your buddy those things.
So the buddy is almost acting like a confidential informant for the club culture.
In a way, yes. And the source mentions a very crucial logistical detail. The buddy should be paid a higher hourly rate for taking on this role.
Put money behind it.
Exactly. It validates that being a culture carrier is real, valuable work for the business. And practically speaking, the buddy is responsible for the little things, like making sure they have lunch with a new hire on day one.
Oh, that is so key, because that high school fear of who do I sit with in the cafeteria is a very real adult anxiety when you start a new job.
It's consistently the #1 anxiety for a new hire. The buddy system solves that immediately.
Okay, so these are all fantastic practices pulled from the specific club surveyed. But the monograph also includes a really interesting literature review, where it steps outside the club world and looks at the giants of the broader hospitality industry. Places like the Ritz-Carlton, Disney, Chick-fil-A. What can private clubs or anyone really learn from them?
Well, let's look at the Ritz-Carlton. They are famous for what they call the Day 21 meeting.
Day 21? That seems like a really arbitrary number. Why 3 weeks?
Because at 3 weeks in, the basic operational training is mostly finished. At this specific meeting, management doesn't test you on how fast you can fold a napkin. They sit you down and ask you to recertify your commitment to their standards.
Oh, wow.
But here's the genius part. They explicitly ask the employee for feedback on whether the reality of the job actually matches the promise that was made during the interview process.
That's incredibly brave of the management. They're basically opening the door and asking, did we lie to you?
They are. And they have a strict phase-out policy tied to this. If the employee hasn't fully bought into the culture by day 21, they are gently encouraged to leave. The Ritz-Carlton would literally rather have an empty position on the schedule than keep someone who's a bad cultural fit.
Talk about protecting the culture at all costs. What about Disney? They were in the literature review, too.
Disney does this amazing thing with the class called traditions. And what's notable is that they teach the history, the legacy, and the why behind Walt Disney long before they ever teach you how to sweep the pavement in the park or operate a ride.
So the meaning comes way before the task.
Precisely. Because if you know why you're sweeping, that you are actively keeping a magical environment pristine for a family's vacation, you sweep differently.
Then Chick-fil-A.
With Chick-fil-A, the research highlights the influence of their founder, S. Troy Cathy. He made it a point to personally welcome new hires whenever possible. It sent a massive top-down signal that every single role, from the fryer to the front counter, fundamentally matters to the success of the company.
So you've got the passport to break down silos, you've got the buddy for safety, you're leading with the culture, you hit that 90-day mark. How do you actually know if any of this worked? The source talks about measuring success, but it kind of reads like most clubs are totally failing at this part.
They really are. The study found that while most of the clubs surveyed genuinely think their onboarding is good, very few actually track the ROI or link it to member satisfaction data. It's almost entirely based on feeling. You know, a manager will say, oh, the new guy seems happy. That's not data.
Right. So what's the tool to fix that?
The stay interview?
The stay interview, which sounds like the exact opposite of an exit interview.
That's exactly what it is. Think about it. Why on earth would you wait until someone is literally packing their box to walk out the door to ask them what's wrong with the company?
Yeah, at that point, it's an autopsy.
Perfect analogy. An exit interview is an autopsy. A stay interview is preventative medicine. You proactively sit down with them at the 90-day mark.
And what are you asking them? Just, are you happy here?
No, you have to get way more specific than that to get good data. You ask targeted questions like, is the day-to-day reality of this job what you expected? Do you have the physical tools you need to succeed? Were you greeted warmly by the rest of the team on your first week?
It's like a 3,000-mile maintenance checkup for the employee relationship.
It is. Because usually the friction points at 90 days are highly fixable. Maybe the employee says, I don't have enough uniform shirts, so I'm doing laundry every single night, or my point-of-sale login glitches half the time. If you fix those small things, they stay.
But if you never ask and you ignore it,
that tiny frustration builds and builds until they rage quit 6 months later.
It's such a powerful, proactive shift in mindset. Instead of constantly managing turnover, you are actively managing retention.
And that perfectly leads us to the shared benefits model that Gradina illustrates near the end of the monograph. There is a Venn diagram in the actual source document, but let's just look at what it really represents emotionally for the club.
Yeah, let's skip the geometry lesson. Break down the core feeling of that model for us.
Basically, Circle 1 is the employer, they get cost savings and lower turnover. Circle 2 is the employee, they get job satisfaction and career growth. But the overlap in the middle. Emotionally, it's about the shift from anxiety to confidence. When a club actually invests in real onboarding, they aren't just ticking HR boxes. They're systematically removing anxiety from the building.
The anxiety of I have no idea what I'm doing and everyone is judging me.
Exactly. When you remove that deep anxiety through the buddy system, the passport program, and really clear expectations, you produce a confident employee. And here is the absolute sweet spot the model is getting at. Only a confident employee can make a club member feel truly relaxed.
That is such a great point. An anxious waiter makes the guest feel anxious.
100%. If I'm internally panicking about where the salad forks are kept, I cannot possibly look you in the eye and ask you about your day. I can't anticipate that you might need a refill on your drink. I am strictly in survival mode. Proper onboarding gets people out of survival mode and into true hospitality mode.
So it's not just a mandate to be nice to the staff. It's equip the staff so they can actually do the job you hired them to do.
Correct. It creates a virtuous cycle. Confident staff naturally leads to happy members, which ultimately means a financially successful club.
Okay, let's bring this all home. We've gone from the bleeding wound of high turnover to the solution of deep, intentional onboarding. From those warm, pre-boarding welcome emails all the way to 90-day stay interviews.
It really is a comprehensive journey. It requires a total mindset shift from checking boxes to building genuine relationships.
And realizing that these principles apply whether you're running a prestigious country club, a local coffee shop, or a tech startup. People just fundamentally want to feel like they belong.
They do. And the cost of ignoring that human need, both in actual dollars and in organizational culture, is just way too high to ignore anymore.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Boris Gradina's research, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, the idea of unintentional onboarding.
Right. The study makes it glaringly clear that onboarding is happening whether you plan it or not.
Yeah.
If you do not have a formal program in place, your program is just chaos, indifference, and bad habits.
And they're absolutely internalizing that chaos.
They are. So the question you really have to ask yourself as a manager is, what is your unintentional onboarding process teaching your new hires right this very second? Because they are learning something every time they clock in. You better make sure it's what you actually want them to know.
That is such a powerful takeaway. If you aren't intentionally teaching them the culture, the chaos is doing it for you. But that brings up one last thought for you to chew on, something we didn't explicitly cover today.
What's that?
Think about the absolute gold standard of hospitality we just discussed. If a century-old elite private club is having to completely rethink and modernize how they welcome a 19-year-old employee just to survive, what does that mean for the rest of the corporate world?
That is a very good question.
Right. If you work in an office, a hospital, a retail store, look at your own industry's onboarding. Are you treating new hires like they hold the keys to your entire business model, or are they just another I-9 form in a filing cabinet? It's definitely something to think about the next time you see a new face on your team. Huge thanks to Boris Gradina for this incredible research, and thank you all for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. See you next time.